When we look at the 20th century, the Catholic Church experienced one of its most dramatic transformations since the days of the Reformation. The Second Vatican Council reshaped the Church's relationship with the modern world. Popes became global figures in ways never seen before, and the papacy itself moved into an era of unprecedented visibility. At the heart of this transformation were three men: Pope Paul VI, Pope John Paul I, and Pope John Paul II. Their stories are woven together, forming a narrative of courage, reform, tragedy, and renewal. Let us begin with Pope Paul VI. Giovanni Battista Montini was born in 1897 in northern Italy. The son of a lawyer and devout Catholic family, young Montini was drawn to both faith and culture. His father was involved in politics and Catholic social activism, and his influence left a mark on Giovanni. He was ordained a priest in 1920 and entered the Vatican's diplomatic service, where his talents for organization, diplomacy, and intellectual clarity became evident. For years, Montini worked behind the scenes, especially in the Vatican Secretariat of State. During World War II, he was deeply involved in efforts to assist refugees, prisoners of war, and those persecuted by the Nazis. He became known for his compassion and his ability to navigate delicate political situations. In 1954, he was made Archbishop of Milan, where he threw himself into pastoral work, engaging with workers, students, and intellectuals. Milan was a city alive with industrial growth and social tensions, and Montini became known as the Archbishop of the Workers. When Pope John III convened the Second Vatican Council in 1962, Montini played a significant role in its early stages. After John III's death in 1963, Montini was elected Pope, taking the name Paul VI. His task was monumental: to carry the Council forward and to implement its sweeping reforms. Paul VI guided Vatican II to its conclusion in 1965, ensuring its documents on liturgy, ecumenism, religious freedom, and the role of the laity would reshape the life of the Church. But he did more than guide a council. He transformed the papacy itself. Paul VI became the first pope in centuries to travel outside Italy extensively. He addressed the United Nations in New York in 1965, pleading, "No more war, war never again." His journeys to Asia, Africa.
Hours before the Pope's arrival, crowds had gathered at Entebbe Airport. In the customary manner, the people of Uganda prepared to greet the pontiff. This was the first time that a reigning pontiff would set foot on African soil. For the nation, and especially for its 3 million Roman Catholics, the arrival of the Pope by VC-10 was the biggest event since independence from Britain 7 years ago. For all the happy cheers of his welcome, the Pope was in Africa on serious business. Uppermost in his mind was the bitter 2-year civil war between Nigeria and Biafra. But President Milton Obote and 4 other African heads of state who greeted him did so as hosts to the pontiff, whose visit had first been planned in order that he might dedicate a shrine to 22 African martyrs. And so, in an open Lincoln Continental, Pope Paul VI began his historic journey into Africa. The Pope arrived at Kololo Terrace, a holy place on a hill overlooking Kampala. There, he and 50 other bishops and cardinals were to celebrate an all-African Mass at the vast 5,000 square foot altar to mark the consecration of 12 black bishops. It was a moving and meaningful service within a faith that in Africa is changing, seeking to break its identification with the colonial past and find its place within the emerging nations.
The Middle East and the Americas made the papacy a global presence in ways never seen before. Paul VI also faced controversies. His encyclical Humanae Vitae in 1968 reaffirmed the Church's teaching against artificial contraception, sparking heated debate and even dissent. Yet, Paul saw himself as a guardian of truth, even when unpopular. His papacy was marked by a deep sense of responsibility. He bore the burden of reform, tradition, and modernity all at once. When Paul VI died in August 1978,
immediately after his death, the Pope's body lies in state at Castel Gandolfo. A simple man in life, he has requested a simple funeral. Working desperately for peace, Pope Paul had gained in stature as his reign progressed. Swiss guards stand by the pontiff's body as it lies on the silk-covered catafalque. A steady stream of mourners, religious and secular, converges on the chapel to see the body removed to Rome for the final rites of the church. Cardinal Poletti, the vicar of Rome, blesses the hearse that is to carry the body of the Supreme Pontiff to Rome for burial in the crypt of St. Peter's. Against the impressive background of the basilica, many thousands gather in St. Peter's Square to witness the arrival of the hearse. The coffin is borne by the sediari, the men whose task it was to carry the Pope during his lifetime in the familiar ceremonial throne. Then the procession of cardinals summoned from all corners of the earth. The great and the humble come to pay their respects as Pope Paul lies in state. Later, a solemn Requiem Mass is celebrated for the first time in the open on the steps of St. Peter's Basilica. The last benediction of a church Pope Paul VI served with simple piety.
The Church mourned a pope who had carried it through one of its most challenging and transformative decades. His death opened the way for one of the most surprising years in papal history, the Year of Three Popes. On August 26, 1978, the conclave elected Albino Luciani, Patriarch of Venice, as pope. He took the name John Paul I, combining the names of his two predecessors, John the III and Paul VI, signaling continuity. John Paul I quickly became known as the Smiling Pope. His warmth, humility, and simplicity endeared him instantly to the faithful. He refused papal coronation, preferring a simple installation mass dot. He spoke openly, smiled constantly, and preached with gentleness. People felt he was approachable, almost like a parish priest suddenly placed on the chair of Peter. In just 33 days, he captured the world's affection. But tragedy struck. On September 28, 1978, John Paul I was found dead in his bed. His sudden death after only 33 days shocked the world. Rumors and conspiracy theories swirled, but the Church was left with a sense of loss. The Pope, who had shown so much promise, so much humanity, was gone in the blink of an eye. The faithful were heartbroken, and the Church was once again called to elect a new Pope. And so came Karol Józef Wojtyła, the Archbishop of Krakow, Poland. On October 16, 1978, the conclave chose him as Pope. He took the name John Paul II in honor of his short-lived predecessor, but his papacy would become one of the longest and most consequential in history. John Paul II was born in 1920 in Wadowice, Poland. His life was marked by suffering from an early age. He lost his mother at 9, his brother soon after, and his father when he was 21. Living under Nazi occupation, he studied secretly for the priesthood, even as he worked in a quarry and a chemical factory to avoid deportation. After the war, he was ordained and became a bishop under communist rule. As a young priest, he was known for hiking, skiing, kayaking, and engaging with young people. As a philosopher, he developed a rich theology of the human person, centered on dignity, freedom, and love. His experience under both Nazism and communism forged in him a deep commitment to human rights and the defense of freedom. When he was elected Pope, John Paul II became the first non-Italian Pope in 455 years. Standing on the balcony of St. Peter's S, he said, "Be not afraid, open wide the doors to Christ." These words became the motto of his papacy. John Paul II became a global pope, traveling to over 120 countries, more than any of his predecessors combined. His visits drew millions, In Poland, his presence in 1979 inspired the Solidarity movement, sparking resistance to communist rule. His role in the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, alongside figures like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, became one of the defining stories of the late 20th century. But his influence was not only political. He was a tireless pastor speaking to young people, families, workers, and the marginalized. He established World Youth Day, drawing millions of young Catholics from across the globe. His charisma, energy, and deep faith captivated the world. Yet his papacy was also marked by suffering. In 1981, he was shot in St. Peter's Square in an assassination attempt. Miraculously surviving, he credited the Virgin Mary with saving his life. Later in life, he suffered visibly from Parkinson's disease, continuing his ministry despite weakness, becoming a living testimony of dignity and suffering. John Paul II also faced challenges within the Church. The clergy sexual abuse crisis began to emerge during his papacy, though it would be addressed more directly by his successors. Still, his theological writings, especially his Theology of the Body, his encyclicals on human dignity, faith, and reason, and his Marian devotion, left a deep imprint on Catholic life. When he died in April 2005, the world mourned. Millions gathered in Rome, and millions more watched on television. The cry of the faithful rose, "Santo subito!" Sainthood now! He was canonized in 2014, becoming St. John Paul II, a saint of our times. From Paul VI's steady hand guiding Vatican II, to John Paul I's brief but radiant smile, to John Paul II's towering presence on the global stage, these three popes carried the Church through one of its most dynamic and challenging eras. Together, they reshaped the papacy for the modern age, global, visible, and deeply engaged with the struggles and hopes of humanity. Their legacy lives on in the reforms of Vatican II, in the memory of a smiling pope who showed us the heart of simplicity, and in the saintly figure of John Paul II, who told the world again and again, "Be not afraid." Their lives were marked by courage, sacrifice, and unshakable conviction, and the foundations they built still support the Church today. So, if you're passionate about uncovering the roots of Christian history, stick around, tap that subscribe button, and share your thoughts in the comments.